Alright guys, I wanted to make a quick video about just how important it is to properly identify the plants that you bring back to your garden, because you might be looking for native ones, and that's super important. Like, I got this beach strawberry here. It's not necessarily like native to the interior of the valley, but it's also used really commonly as a ground cover, and I really think that they should be using one of the other two species that grow out here, like this guy over here, which is the Virginia strawberry. Got some flowers on it there, but you can kind of see them growing right next to each other there. And I mean, it's really close to where I live, so I guess you could say it's like native adjacent, native to the state. But this guy here, I thought I was getting a black raspberry, because I pulled it out of the same location that I found black raspberry, and it was a little bit chaotic, the location that I found it in, so I wasn't quite able to find really good looking, well identified canes, but I was able to find some sections that had rooted out. And you know, when you get a section that has roots on it, it's pretty much a guaranteed success transplanting it. And it's probably the most, in my opinion, the most recommended method of doing it. So this right here is black raspberry, and I found it from the exact same spot as that other plant that I showed you. And you can kind of see the difference in, you know, the primary difference here being the leaf structure. The leaves are very, very different. And something that you'll notice is that these guys are growing, you know, straight up, as opposed to trailing blackberry, which doesn't. Its thorns, these canes are really small, but the thorns are much more noticeable compared to trailing blackberry. Trailing blackberry has very, very, very small canes, and they can easily break off. And something else that's on here is there's a bit of a bloom. I don't know if you can really see it in the video because of how bright the sun is on this, but there's a white bloom on the fresh green canes, and I can't really do it on this one because of how thorny that is. But there's only two native brambles here in Oregon that do that, and that's trailing blackberry and the black raspberry. Let's see, what's something else that can identify this? The very, very white undersides of the leaves. Again, the light from the sun is really bad here, but it has very white undersides of its leaves, as opposed to this guy here, which has green undersides. I'm also noticing that the hairs are very velvety on here, and I thought that maybe this might be trailing blackberry, because trailing blackberry can on occasion produce these kind of odd shaped leaves, especially when it gets larger. But these thorns are way too stiff on here, way too big. And I'm noticing that this is the key here, is that this leaf here, you can see how it has these two separate ridges here, and it's not really isolated to that. It's going to have them in a couple other spots, but it has these ridges on the leaf stems, and it doesn't on this cane here, but it has them on the leaf stems, and it's going to have them on this one here too. Once it grows a little bit larger, I can feel almost triangular in shape. And that's what led me to the conclusion that, as I pull this out here, that this is most likely Himalayan blackberry, which is not native. I don't want it in my yard. I don't want it anywhere near my yard, so I'm going to toss it. It is a bad identification on my part, which is why it's so important for you to follow up on all your transplants, pay very close attention to them, because if I had let this spread out, there's no way I would have been able to control it at all. And so here's that trailing blackberry I was telling you about. Very small thorns, very, very small thorns. You can barely see them. If you were to brush this with a glove, or with a small piece of fabric, all the thorns would just come right off of it. And this is one of the fresh canes. You can see it's not quite upright. It is pointing up because it's a new shoot, but it's not quite upright. Once this guy gets long enough, it's just going to trail along the ground just like this one did. And I'm hoping to get these long enough to get out into the sunlight. This one over here, it's a male flowered one. It's just not growing. Like these are all second year canes here. And it's not flowering because it didn't get enough sunlight. But I'm wanting it to get some new canes straight out of the ground, and it's just not producing anything yet, which kind of has me worried. But you can kind of see, like I was saying, how it gets sort of this odd shape to some of its leaves sometimes. But it's not quite as velvety. It is hairy, but it's not quite as velvety as these ones are here. And so, like I said, part of that misidentification came from the roundness of this stem here. If I can get my phone to focus here. The roundness of that stem here, you can't really notice it too well sometimes, because when the end of a bramble gets close to the ground, all blackberries and raspberries will do this. If the tip gets long enough and starts going towards the ground, it will try burrowing into the ground to do exactly what this one did, which is start a new plant. And when it gets to that point, some of those features kind of change because it's changing its structure, it's trying to burrow into the ground. So that's how I messed this one up. So yeah, very important, you guys, to try to properly identify your plants. And even if you can't, or if you think that it's one thing, you're confident that it's one thing, always double check, always verify, always keep a close eye on it, because if it's not, then you're going to want to get it, unless it's beneficial, right? Some people might want to have some Himalayan blackberries in their garden. I wouldn't. That's not my thing. But if you're dedicated to, controlling it and keeping it managed, then, that's up to you. If it were up to me, it would be illegal like wine berries in most states, but that's just me. So I just thought I'd share that with you guys. One of my blunders in foraging for native edibles to add to my garden. I hope you enjoyed my insights on that, so that you don't make the same mistakes I did.